Intelligence. What makes someone intelligent? Are you more intelligent than you think? Intelligence has always been a difficult concept to quantify. The conventional, traditional method of establishing intelligence is by using an IQ test, where you're given all these questions and then a time clock goes on and you have to answer a whole number of different questions put to you about numbers and language and perhaps diagrams. But there's a limitation to what that's actually measuring. It's measuring something, the ability to process information, understand and digest what the problem is that you're trying to solve, but there's a limit to what it can do. Rarely are IQ tests testing for creativity. And there's intelligence like musical intelligence, language ability, and there's social intelligence, interactions, understanding, empathy. These are things which are what an intelligent person would be capable of doing, but they're not really measured in these tests. So it's quite possible that you're more intelligent yourself than you give yourself credit for. Throughout my life, I've polarised people. Some people have thought I'm very stupid. I've been called stupid many times, particularly by my parents, who weren't, have to say, particularly bright people. But they didn't see me as being intelligent, they saw me as being stupid. This is a perception thing. When I was at college, I did a diploma in psychology, and one of my projects was on perception of intelligence. I was measuring how intelligent people thought they were. And that's different from an IQ test, where I was trying to establish if someone thought they were intelligent. There is an effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect, by a guy called Justin Dunning and somebody else called, I can't remember his first name, Mr. Kruger, and they were pointing out that people with very little, your average intelligence or a little ability, tend to overestimate just how good they are at things. They tend to think they're wiser and have more ability than they actually do. It's kind of inverse. It's interesting that I've very rarely heard a genuinely intelligent person ever state they're intelligent. That's something that they don't normally do. But I have heard a lot of people who I would consider to be of average intelligence state, I am an intelligent person and my friends are intelligent and blah blah blah. Never been too convinced by that. It's rare for a genuinely intelligent person to state, I'm intelligent, because they know that there's a limit to what they can know, and also an intelligent person tends to be more critical of their own ability, and they will doubt if they are intelligent. They will be looking for ways almost to prove to themselves that they don't know everything. They're more willing to look at it that way. A person who's not particularly intelligent doesn't have that self-doubt. What they think is, it's obvious, everyone knows this, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, that type of thing. So I'm going to have a look at what intelligence could be, or how you may be more intelligent than you really are. So I'll break it down into a few different topic areas. So the obvious type of thing that we think about with intelligence is that a genius is intelligent, and somebody invents something which is an original idea, concept, and we're all in awe of this person because they seem to be brilliant, and we think, well, where did that come from? They're not like you or I. These people are super, like Stephen Hawking's, Einstein, and all the usual suspects. But also, genius can be applied to footballers. George Best used to be called a genius, and this sort of thing. So that's probably a different meaning for the word genius. It means highly skillful, but not necessarily in terms of intelligence. Footballers are not known for their intelligence. They're known for playing, punting a gas bag around with great skill. They're not tend to be thinking people. And so what is a genius? Well, a genius is someone who's probably had many ideas, perhaps hundreds of ideas, and one day they strike lucky and it's a brilliant idea, but there could have been 299 ideas that were rubbish. So what a genius is someone probably who's quite industrious, and they seek things and they're not scared about thinking out of the box and all that type of thing. The term thinking out of the box comes from a little test where you're given a grid of, it's a box, and it's got dots in it, and you're supposed to be able to put a line through these dots in a certain way. You get 3 lines to cover all the dots, and most people can't solve it. It doesn't seem to be possible. But when you think out of the box is when you draw a line outside the box and come back in, you can get the angle to cover all the dots, and that's where the thinking out of the box comes from. You have to draw outside the box and then come back in. So it may be geniuses are not as clever as we think. It's just that they struck lucky by quantity. Even Einstein's been known to get very big things wrong, significantly wrong. So, but obviously his ideas that were good were fantastic and brilliant. There's no doubt about that. It doesn't mean to say he can't be wrong as well. Leonardo da Vinci was seen to be a genius, but in actual fact, he seemed to go from one thing to another and never persisted anywhere. Some people have observed him to be perhaps someone who wasn't getting anything particularly finished. He was just moving on to the next thing, then moving on to the next thing. A genius, I think, is probably not so restricted by conventional thought, and they will think of a different way of tackling an understanding, and that's what makes them different. Their mind will find a solution different from what the crowd might do. The wisdom of the crowd itself is an interesting concept. It seems as if it can't possibly be the case, but if everybody pits their estimates together, you can get wisdom out of it apparently from nowhere. I think there used to be some game they'd have at fairs in Victorian times, I don't know if they still do it these days, where you put a lot of something in a jar. It could be a lot of sweets or a lot of gobstoppers, sweet, something like that. A quantity of small items in a big jar, and the idea would be each person would guess their best estimate as to how many of the sweets were in the jar, giant jar. And what would happen is, as it went throughout the day, everybody would make a guess. Someone might say there's 150, another person might guess at 75, somebody might say 92, and if you collect all the individual guesses, this happens for a fact, if you add up all the individual guesses, estimates that people have, then divide them by the number of guesses. So say you got 100 different estimates. If you add those up, total them all up, and then divide it by 100, whatever that figure is, which is the average or the mean of everyone's guess, say that you get the average being 147 from all the estimates. It's guaranteed if you open up the jar and count them out, there will be 147 in there. It's called wisdom of the crowd. Some people grossly overestimate, other people will underestimate, some people will get near the middle. But if you add them all up and average them out, it becomes correct, but no intelligence is really involved there. It's all guesswork, but it's exact. And that's known as wisdom of the crowd. Another aspect of an intelligent person is often they have a different type of humour from most general people, often a darker sense of humour, a more ironic, subtle, nuanced humour. And one of the problems with that is if the person has that type of humour, maybe most people won't get their jokes. I often find people who are getting paid an awful lot of money for their comedy routines, I don't think they're that funny. I think they're mildly amusing, but I don't think they're laugh out loud hysterical, and often it appears to me that they're stating very obvious things that you almost know the joke anyway. Of course, a lot of it's done with the style of presentation and the likability, personality type of the person, and how they dramatise it. But I often think that these people are not sure if they're wisecrackers, comedians, or maybe even just smart asses, and sometimes they can be quite mean. A lot of comedy could be very mean in its spirit. So intelligent people tend to have a nuanced, subtle, often maybe a bit of a darker sense of humour. Not necessarily a sick sense of humour, just a darkly ironic humour, which may not translate in a text, so you can get yourself into a lot of trouble if you send a message when you're trying to be ironic, but there's no voice tone. You might find yourself, in trouble. Memory is an interesting one, and I'm not really talking about remembering a list, a shopping list, or a times table. What I'm thinking about is intelligent people tend to have a very good long-term memory, and they can recall things which seem to be completely amazing, and they do it in detail. I've got an eidetic memory myself, which means I can remember just about everything from the age of around about 5 years old. And when I'm thinking about things that happened at school when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they're as clear to me today as if they happened yesterday. There's not been any fading of that memory, but it's not like I'm recalling it by rota. What it's more like is I'm watching it as if it's a movie, so I can actually, it's better than memorising, because it's not that type of memory. It's a quality memory where you have all the nuances, which means you can see people's spatial position, hear their tone of voice, look at their facial expressions, and almost pan around and see what else is in that context. So it's not just like remembering something from a book, it's experiential memory where you're actually back in the context, and you can gain insight that way, because with your experience and hindsight you can get a better idea what was probably happening, whereas as a child you wouldn't have known that. So that can be useful, but it can also be a curse, because all the bad things and all the horrible things, all the insults, you're going to remember that very clearly as well, and that's not so useful. And but if you're wanting to be a writer, then that type of memory can be quite useful, because you can write a lot from your experience, because you can remember things and it makes it more authentic, the stories. Why do these people have better memories? It may be that they practice a lot more, or they don't get involved in a lot of distractions. I've never really watched the TV ever in my life. After about the age of 15, I gave up watching the TV, and maybe just a very occasional programme, and I didn't really ever get involved with newspapers at all. Just could not get through them at all, and TV tended to make my eyes glaze over. And even films, I've only maybe watched 20 movies in my whole life, and I can't even remember any of them. I can only really remember about 5, maybe 10 at the most in my whole life. So I average watching one movie every 10 years or something. It might even be every 20 years for all I know. So this means that I've kept my mind free of what I would say is a lot of clutter, and this may not mean that I've got a better memory. It just means it's not got clutter in it, or maybe I am concentrating and actually trying to remember things, because we have the term absent-mindedness, and this is where someone can't find their car keys or their jacket or something like that, and they don't even remember where they parked their car, even worse, so they don't know where to go back to pick up their car, and they've forgotten where they parked it. Well, that's because your mind was absent. You're doing something almost without thinking, so you weren't recording it. It's almost impossible to lose something if you're conscious. If you put your car keys down somewhere and consciously record that and just say, I am conscious, here's my keys, I'm putting them on this table, you've recorded it. So when you're trying to figure it out where they are, you won't have a fuzzy memory. It will come back to you instantly. It's when you're doing it while your mind's somewhere else, is absent from the event, that you don't have a track back. Mary Lou Henner, I think her name is, from the Big Dolly Bird type of woman with big hair, from Taxi, the comedy, the working in the taxi office with Danny DeVito and all that sort of thing. She, as a senior woman now, she can remember everything, all the lines and all the different aspects of that programme and everything else in life. She's got an eidetic memory and has actually taken part in quite a few studies, scientific studies, because she's one of these people who can recall almost everything. Daydreaming is an interesting one. I've often been frowned upon in my life for staring into space. When I was at school, perhaps a teacher might say, "David, stop staring out the window." I did get my own back because I was staring at the clouds, but a long time later I became a meteorologist, atmospheric scientist, and that was my job. My job was a meteorological observer, so I was recording what I was staring out the window and recording it scientifically. So it was useful to me in the end, staring out the window, because it became a full-time occupation for the Ministry of Defence. So daydreaming is seen to be, I don't know what it's like these days, but when I was young, daydreaming was seen to be not doing something proper. It was seen to be being lazy or not paying attention, and you had to show signs of doing something. Get on with it. Stop. You're in a dwam, they might say. Your head's in the clouds. But in actual fact, it's very, very powerful daydreaming where you explore your imagination, when intelligent people are often prone to daydream. I've heard many cases of top flight scientists sitting in a car, say, with their wife, and they're driving down the freeway or the motorway, and then they seem to go into some type of dream, and they've switched off, and the wife knows that that's them thinking at a deeper level. So daydreaming is where all your good ideas come from. If you're a writer, your stories are going to come from these daydreams. If you're a musician, that tune could be coming up in your head. If you're a scientist, your theory will be getting explored. So therefore you're not interacting with anything around you. You're right inside your head daydreaming, but it's deep, and it's all encompassing. You've cut off the outside world. So daydreaming can often be a sign of an intelligent person rather than someone who's clueless, as it can often be portrayed to be. Emotions are, dominant in the human experience, and understanding your own emotions are a really good sign of intelligence. Is understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your fears, and your characteristics about your personality, and handling emotions without going into a rage or without being easily triggered, provoked, or goaded. I've worked with quite a few people who, at the slightest sign of them perhaps being criticised, they go almost berserk, into a tantrum, because they're so insecure and have such a little understanding of themselves. Their face almost goes purple with rage, and it's just something really minor, but they've been challenged or perhaps mildly criticised for something, and they go berserk. That's something which is not intelligent. An intelligent person should be aware of any of these emotions developing in them, and try and keep some kind of control over them. If you can't just solve everything by shouting, and intelligent people tend to be more measured, because they'll think before they react. The opposite's the case for people who are not particularly brilliant. They react first, punch somebody in the face, and then think, was it the right person I punched, or should I, or did? So they'll think second, go, maybe it wasn't, or then they might hurt their hand and say, that wasn't, I hurt my hand now because you never thought of that. They are reacting rather than thinking. They're putting the cart before the horse. If someone does need punched in the face, then have a good think about it before you actually go through with it, and count to 10 and then count to 20, and then you might find that you don't have that rage anymore. It's calmed down a bit. So being self-aware of your own limitations and your own knowledge is a sign of intelligence. Music is an interesting one. I've often thought you can judge someone by their music collection and musical taste. Intelligent people tend to have an eclectic taste or a wide range of music taste right across the spectrum. They're interested in lots of different genres, and they have very specific tastes as well. If you look at someone's music collection. It may just be something nondescript, or the type of music that generally get purchased by anybody and everybody, and there's no specific taste involved. It's just a few famous shows and perhaps something Reader's Digest collection or something which is not really heavily inspiring. But if you see someone with a wide and interesting collection of music, you probably be looking at a very intelligent type of person. I once met a guy who was a trainee doctor a long time ago, and I went into his room. It was just he lived in pretty much a cupboard with a bed in it, and renting a room, but it wasn't even a room. But half the space was taken up by his record collection, several hundred albums, and that really impressed me, because what impressed me even more was I looked at a lot of the music and I never heard of quite a lot of the groups, and this was very impressive to me, because I thought I knew everyone, but this guy knew a lot of people that I hadn't heard of, and it kind of I thought, well, I've got some catching up to do here. Dealing with ambiguity, when someone's neither this or that, it's ambivalent, it's ambiguous. This can be a real problem for average types of people, but more intelligent people can understand the limitations of making something black or white. Not everything has a simple, neat solution. It doesn't always have to be this or that. It doesn't have to be science or religion, and it doesn't have to be adversarial. We're trained at school for everything to be a fight. Politicians talk about the battle, and they used to have these things called the battle bus, and war language is at the front line, and we're taught that everything's a fight, it's black and white, it's us against them, adversarial, but like a court case, as a winner and a loser, and that's not really the way things are. There may be a barrister may present a very good case and lose the case, but that's not because he wasn't a good barrister. It's because the case was going to be lost because it was indefensible, but the work could have been superior to the person who won the case. And we get into this Hegelian dialectic where it has to be this solution or that solution. You can't have one, and we also compete. Rather than listen to what the other person is saying, we try to shout them down. So therefore, things may not be this or that. They could be both at the same time, or they could be somewhere in the middle, so that the ambiguity and conflicting information and conflicting ideas, someone who's more intelligent can usually navigate through that sort of stuff without getting themselves too much worked up. They'll understand there can be limitations to understanding itself. You may have to have two types of solutions to something. Intelligent people often have fantastic imaginations, and they will explore all their ideas and take them as far as they wish. And this is where good music comes from, good art, good storytelling, writing. It's all coming from a highly developed imagination, and this can often be a sign of high intelligence going hand in hand. This is where the ideas come from, and people who have got not much imagination tend to just accept everything they're told and really look around for what other people are saying, and they develop their opinions and then their convictions, which are not really their own. They've been told by repetition, and then they get entrained by people around them and they take on those views. Someone with imagination will take their ideas out of the current context and play it any way they wish, and often come up with fantastic pieces of creativity. So a creative mind tends to be a sign of someone being pretty intelligent. Intelligent people tend to be very careful about their sources of inspiration, and are selective. They just don't take up anything which is around. They will look carefully at where they're getting their ideas from, who's providing those ideas, and how valid are they. So a sign of intelligence is not just to accept what's around you. You want to do your research. You'll find out the background of a person. What do they know? You'll listen to different people, get different viewpoints. You'll be checking your sources of information all the time to make sure they are the best. An intelligent person won't just look for the person that seems to suit the occasion. They'll be more critically viewing information sources and inspiration sources. They'll look for the best musician in their music genre, the best writer, and study them rather than just what's been handed to them on a plate. Doing nothing is seen to be unproductive, maybe even lazy, but often intelligent people will spend time doing nothing, maybe even just relaxing. It's almost a form of meditation where you've decided not to do anything, and this would seem to be quite bizarre, unproductive. But in actual fact, it's thinking, resting your brain, sitting and not giving yourself any tasks, resting your brain, and perhaps not thinking very much about anything, almost like a form of meditation. And doing nothing is quite refreshing because it means that you're not timetabling everything like a machine being made to produce, perform. These are engineering terms, and that's where we get performance and drive. These are Victorian terms for engineering, and this was passed on to human psychology. So you get a performance target and all this type of thing, and what are you driven, what are your drives? These are all engineering. We're humans, we're not machines. So doing nothing can often be what an intelligent person decides to do. They're making a conscious decision to do nothing. A sign of a high level of intelligence can be the ability for someone to focus their concentration on something and cut out everything else around. And I experienced this once when I was in class. I was about 7 years old, and I just started to read books, but I chose to read adult books right away. I was never really into comics or anything like that. I wanted to read what I would say proper books, and I got this book. I can remember the cover, using that eidetic memory. I can remember the blue cover, and I remember even the exact sentences out of it and what it was all about. It was about this. So this young boy, roughly the same age as me, was wandering around playing on a rocky cliff area, and he found a cave, and when we went into this cave and went in deeper in, there was actually an old man living in this cave, and he was a wise man, and this boy had picked up a lot of information and ideas from this man who was cut off from the rest of society. And such a fascinating idea to me. In class one day, There's 42 people in the class and we're all sitting in rows, and the teacher was big authority. You didn't defy the teacher in those days. And I had got into this book and I was reading it with my total concentration, and then I suddenly was aware that everyone was looking at me. I put my head up and everyone in the class was staring at me, and the teacher was staring at me, and I could see that I'd been given a row because I wasn't answering the teacher. And then people were looking and saying, "Oh, you're in trouble." But the teacher said, "No, that's okay, that's alright." David was so concentrating on his book that he cut out everything else. So at least I got off the hook with that one. But this was a case where I had switched right into the book and managed to switch off everything else around me. But if I'd known people were staring at me and the teacher was going to get me into trouble, I would have just looked up right away.